The phone rang just as I settled into my armchair, a cup of coffee cooling on the side table. It was a quiet evening in my little house by the coast of Maine, the kind of evening where the ocean whispers through the open window and the world feels at peace. I glanced at the clock, 7:30 p.m., and picked up the old corded phone, the one Grace always insisted we keep. "Never know when you'll need a reliable line," she'd say, her voice warm in my memory. "Dad, you won't believe this." Nathan's voice burst through the receiver, brimming with excitement. My son, 39 years old, always had a way of sounding like a kid when he was worked up. "We sold the house. $600,000, Dad. Can you imagine?" I nearly spilled my coffee. "Sold the house? Nathan, what are you talking about? The one you and Claire bought 3 years ago?" "Yeah, exactly," he said, his enthusiasm unshaken. "The market's wild right now. These buyers came in with cash, no questions asked. We made a fortune." The words hit me like a cold wave. That house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was the dream home Nathan and Claire had begged me to help them buy. 3 years ago, I'd handed over $260,000 from my retirement savings, every penny scraped together from years of careful planning. Grace had been gone a year by then, but I could still hear her voice in my head, urging me to take care of family. So I did. I gave them the money, no hesitation, because that's what fathers do. "Nathan," I said, my voice trembling despite myself, "where are you going to live now?" A pause. I heard muffled voices in the background, maybe Claire's, sharp and quick. "Oh, we'll figure it out, Dad. Don't worry. The important thing is we're set now. Claire's already got plans for the money." "Plans?" I set the coffee down, my stomach tightening. "What kind of plans?" "You know Claire," he said, laughing lightly. "She's got her eye on this fancy RV, top of the line like a house on wheels, and some new tech gadgets. For the business, real cutting-edge stuff. Oh, and she's booking us a trip to Hawaii, first class all the way." I sank deeper into the armchair, staring at Grace's photograph on the mantel. Her smile was soft, patient, the way she looked at me during our last summer together. "Nathan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "what about the $260,000 I gave you for that house?" "That was a loan, son. We talked about this." Silence. Long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then Nathan's voice came back, sharper now, almost defensive. "Dad, come on. You gave us that money. It's ours now. We can do what we want with it." The word stung like a slap. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles whitening. "Nathan, that wasn't a gift. You promised to pay me back. You said it was for your future, for your family." Another laugh, but this one was different. Hollow, dismissive. "Dad, you know how these things go. Family helps family. Besides, you don't need the money. You've got this house, your pension, Mom's insurance. You're fine." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was my boy, the one I'd raised to keep his word, to respect the sacrifices others made for him. Grace always said Nathan had a good heart, just needed a little steering. But this wasn't the boy who used to sit with me on the porch, talking about his dreams. "Nathan," I said, my voice low, "I trusted you. That money was from my retirement, from your mother's and my savings. You can't just—" "Dad, relax," he cut me off. "We're finally getting ahead. You should be happy for us." Then before I could respond, I heard Claire's voice, loud and impatient. "Nathan, Tell him we've got to go. The RV dealer's waiting. Gotta run, Dad, Nathan said quickly. Thanks for being cool about this. The line went dead. I sat there, holding the silent phone, staring at the papers scattered on my desk. 3 years ago, those same papers had been full of hope. A thank you note from Nathan, his handwriting messy but sincere. Dad, you're the best. We'll pay you back, promise. Love, Nathan and Claire. Now those words felt like lies, like ink, that had dried and faded into nothing. I stood and walked to the mantel, touching the frame of Grace's photograph. Her eyes seemed to watch me, steady and knowing. What happened to our boy, Grace? I whispered. Outside, the ocean murmured, but it offered no answers. The weight of Nathan's betrayal settled over me, heavy and cold, like the Maine fog, rolling in at dawn. I opened the drawer where I kept my important papers, the ones Grace always teased me for organizing like a librarian. Somewhere in there was the folder from that day in 2020 when I handed Nathan the check. I didn't know what I was looking for yet, but something told me I'd need it. Something told me this wasn't over. The fog was thick that Saturday morning, wrapping my little house in a gray blanket that muffled the sound of the waves. I was up early, as always, brewing coffee in the old pot Grace swore by. The kitchen smelled of roasted beans, and for a moment I could almost hear her humming as she used to, flipping pancakes on weekends. I was just pouring a cup when the pounding on my front door shattered the quiet. It wasn't a polite knock. It was loud, insistent, like someone demanding to be let in. I squinted through the window, my heart sinking. A moving truck sat in my driveway, its engine still rumbling. Behind it was Nathan's car, trunk open, suitcases spilling out. I tightened the belt of my robe and shuffled to the door, my slippers soft against the hardwood. Through the frosted glass, I saw two figures, Nathan's broad shoulders and Claire's slim frame, her hair pulled tight in a bun. My hand shook as I turned the deadbolt. Dad! Nathan's grin was wide, too wide, like he was selling me something. We're here. I blinked, still trying to make sense of the scene. Here? Nathan, what's going on? Claire stepped forward, clutching a designer handbag that probably cost more than my monthly pension. We sold the house, Arthur, she said, her voice bright but sharp like glass. So we need a place to crash for a bit. You know, just until we find something new. I stood frozen in the doorway, the cold Maine air seeping through my robe. Crash? You mean live here, in my house? Nathan's grin faltered, but only for a second. Come on, Dad, don't make it weird. You've got all this space, just you rattling around in this big house. We're family. We figured it'd be fine. Fine? My voice came out louder than I meant, and I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. Nathan, you sold your house, the one I helped you buy, and now you just show up expecting to move in. Without even asking? Claire's eyes narrowed, her lips tightening into a line. Arthur, don't be selfish. Family helps family, right? That's what you always say. She gestured to the moving truck, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. It's just temporary. We'll be out of your hair soon. I looked past them, noticing the neighbors stirring. Henry, the retired fisherman across the street, was pretending to check his mailbox, but his eyes were on us. Ellen, who ran the local bakery, had paused on her morning walk, her dog tugging at the leash. The Thompsons, out for their usual stroll, slowed down near their gate, watching. The whole street was waking up to this spectacle. No, I said, my voice firmer now. You can't stay here. This is my home, Nathan. You made your choices. Nathan's face hardened, the grin gone. Dad, you're being ridiculous. You've got 3 bedrooms you don't even use. We're not asking for a handout, just a roof for a little while. A roof? I stepped forward, blocking the doorway. You sold a house for $600,000. Where's that money, Nathan? Where's the $260,000 I loaned you? Claire laughed, a sharp cutting sound that made my skin crawl. Oh, please, Arthur. That money's gone. Allocated. We've got plans, important plans. A new RV, some tech for Nathan's side hustle. Our Hawaii trip. You can't expect us to just sit on that cash. Gone? I repeated, my chest tightening. You spent my money, my retirement savings, on an RV and a vacation, and now you think you can just move in here. From across the street, Henry had stopped pretending to check his mail. He was standing now, arms crossed, watching openly. Ellen's dog had gone quiet, and the Thompsons were whispering to each other. The fog seemed to amplify every word, carrying, in our argument across the quiet street. Dad, stop it, Nathan said, his voice loud enough to echo. You're making a scene. We're family. You don't turn family away. I'm not turning you away, I said, my hands trembling but my voice steady. I'm saying you don't get to walk all over me, not after what you've done. That's when Claire snapped. You selfish old man, she shouted, stepping closer, her face flushed. You're sitting in this big house, hoarding space you don't need, while we're trying to build a life. Before I could react, she grabbed a small brass lamp from one of their suitcases, probably some expensive piece they'd bought with my money, and hurled it at my front window. The glass shattered with a sickening crash, shards scattering across the porch like broken promises. I stumbled back, my heart pounding, the cold air stinging my face. The lamp lay among the glass, glinting in the morning light. For a moment, no one moved. The street was dead silent, except for the distant hum of the ocean. Then Henry started crossing the street, his boots heavy on the pavement. Ellen let out a gasp, her hand covering her mouth. The Thompsons stepped closer, their faces grim. Claire! Nathan grabbed her arm, pulling her back. What the hell are you doing? You saw what he did, she screamed, pointing at me. He's trying to ruin us. He's the one tearing this family apart. I stood there, staring at the broken window, the one Grace had loved, because it caught the sunrise just right. My cheek burned with humiliation, worse than any physical pain. The neighbors were all watching now. Henry, Ellen, the Thompsons, even old Mrs. Carter peering from her porch. My home, my sanctuary, had just been violated, and half the street had seen it. Henry reached me first, his weathered face creased with concern. Arthur, you all right? He asked, his voice low but firm. That was way out of line. I touched the door frame, steadying myself. I'm fine, Henry, I said, though my voice shook. But they need to leave. You heard him, Henry said, turning to Nathan and Claire. Get off his property. Now. Nathan's face was pale, his eyes darting between me and the broken window. Dad, we didn't mean... Look, let's just talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, I said, my voice cold. You've made your choices. Get your things and go. Claire was still fuming, but Nathan pulled her toward the car, muttering something I couldn't hear. The moving truck driver, who'd been watching from his cab, started the engine. As they piled their suitcases back into the trunk, Claire shouted, over her shoulder. "You'll regret this, Arthur. You'll wish you'd helped us when you had the chance." The car peeled out, tires screeching against the pavement. The moving truck followed, its rumble fading into the fog. I stood in my doorway, glass crunching under my slippers, feeling the weight of every neighbor's gaze. Henry put a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Arthur," he said. "Don't let them make you doubt it." Ellen approached, her dog wagging its tail. "We all saw it, Arthur," she said softly. "That woman had no right. None." The Thompsons nodded from across the street, their faces a mix of shock and support. Mrs. Carter called out from her porch, "You're not alone, Arthur. We've got your back." I looked at the broken window, the shards glinting like pieces of my trust in Nathan. Something shifted inside me, something hard and unyielding. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my home, my dignity, the life Grace and I had built. I wasn't going to let them take that from me. The broken window was boarded up by noon, thanks to Henry, who'd called his nephew with a toolbox and a sheet of plywood. The house felt different now, quieter, like it was holding its breath. I stood in my study, the one Grace used to call my thinking room, staring at the shards of glass I'd swept into a bucket. Each piece caught the light, reminding me of the promises Nathan had shattered just as easily. I could still hear Claire's voice, sharp and accusing, calling me selfish. I could still see Nathan's face, pale and silent, as they drove away. But something new was stirring inside me, a hardness, a clarity I hadn't felt since Grace was alive. I sat at my desk, the old oak one Grace had picked out at a flea market decades ago. Her photograph sat on the corner, her smile steady and encouraging, like she was telling me to keep going. I opened the bottom drawer, the one that always stuck, and pulled out the box where I kept important papers. Grace used to tease me about my filing system, said I was more organized than a librarian. "You'll thank me one day," I'd tell her, and she'd laugh, her eyes sparkling. Now, as I sifted through the folders, I wondered if today was that day. There it was, tucked under old tax returns, a manila envelope labeled Nathan House Loan 2020. My hands trembled as I opened it, pulling out the contract. 8 pages typed, on Margaret Stone's letterhead, my lawyer and friend of 30 years. The words were clear, precise, like the blueprints I used to draft in my engineering days. Principal amount, $260,000. Term, 5 years. Interest, 6.5% annually. Default clause. If payments are missed for 90 days, the entire balance becomes due immediately. Nathan's signature was at the bottom, bold and hurried, next to mine. Claire's was there too, as a witness, though her handwriting looked oddly stiff, like she'd been reluctant to sign. I leaned back in my chair, the contract heavy in my hands. 3 years ago, that document had been a symbol of trust, of helping my son build a life. Now it felt like evidence, a shield against the betrayal that had unfolded. I remembered that day in Margaret's office, the summer of 2020. The air had smelled of polished wood and fresh coffee. Nathan had been all smiles, promising to pay me back, his voice full of gratitude. Claire, though, had been fidgety, her eyes darting to the door like she couldn't wait to leave. "Why do we need all this paperwork, Arthur?" she'd asked. Her tone clipped. "We're family." "Because family doesn't mean careless," I'd said, echoing Grace's words. "Clear agreements make strong relationships." Nathan had nodded, signing quickly, but Claire's hesitation had lingered in my mind, a small warning I'd ignored at the time. I reached for the phone and dialed Margaret's number. my fingers steady despite the storm in my chest. She answered. On the second ring, her voice warm but professional. "Arthur, good to hear from you. Everything all right?" "No, Margaret," I said, my voice quieter than I expected. "It's Nathan. He sold the house I helped him buy, spent the money, and says the $260,000 I gave him was a gift. Yesterday, he and Claire showed up demanding to move in. When I said no, Claire threw a lamp through my front window, in front of half the neighborhood. A pause. Then Margaret's voice turned sharp like a blade being unsheathed. "She did what?" "Threw a lamp. Broke my window. Henry, Ellen, the Thompsons, they all saw it. They're ready to be witnesses if I need them." "Arthur," she said, her tone now all business, "do you still have that loan contract we drafted?" I looked down at the papers spread across my desk. Right here in my hands. "Good. Can you meet me at my office this afternoon? Bring the contract, every page, every signature. We need to talk options." I agreed, and after hanging up, I sat there for a long moment, staring at Grace's photograph. Her smile seemed to say, "You're doing the right thing, Arthur. Don't back down." I pulled out my old calculator, the one I'd used for engineering projects, and ran the numbers. Principal, $260,000. Interest at 6.5% for 3 years, $50,700. Total due, $310,700. The figure stared back at me, cold and undeniable. Nathan thought he could laugh off my trust, call my sacrifice a gift. But this contract wasn't just paper. It was proof. A promise he'd made and broken. I remembered that summer day in 2020, sitting at Margaret's conference table. Nathan had been nervous, twisting his wedding ring as I handed him the check. "Dad, this means everything," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion. "We'll pay you back, I swear." Claire had smiled too, but it was tight, like she was playing a part. "You're the best father-in-law anyone could ask for," she'd said, her words polite but hollow. I'd believed them then, believed in their dreams. Grace would have been proud, I'd thought, helping our boy start his life. Now, sitting. In my study, I saw that moment for what it was, a mistake born of love. I'd trusted too much, assumed family meant honor. Grace had always warned me about that. "You're too soft with Nathan," she'd say, her voice gentle but firm. "Love him, but don't let him walk all over you." I hadn't listened then, but I was listening now. I stood and walked to the boarded-up window in the living room. The plywood blocked the sunlight, casting shadows across the room. Outside, the fog was lifting, revealing the quiet street where Henry was watering his garden, where Ellen was walking, her dog. Normal people, living normal lives, who'd seen my son and his wife turn my home into a battlefield. I touched the rough wood, feeling the weight of what had happened. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about respect, about the life Grace and I had built, about the man I still was. I went back to my desk and opened the contract again, reading every line, every clause. Nathan hadn't made a single payment in 3 years, not a dime. According to the contract, he owed me everything, plus interest, and he'd violated it by selling the house without my consent. Margaret had been thorough, her legal mind as sharp as ever. This document was my lifeline, my way to take back what was mine. Called Margaret again, confirming our meeting. "Arthur," she said, her voice steady, "we're going to send a formal demand letter. Nathan will have 10 days to pay the full amount, $310,700. If he refuses, we file in court for contract enforcement and damages for Claire's vandalism. With witnesses, we've got a strong case." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. What? About the broken window? The humiliation? Separate civil action, she said. Assault, property damage, emotional distress. Claire's actions were public, Arthur. The court won't take kindly to a daughter-in-law attacking her elderly. Father-in-law in his own front yard. I looked at Grace's photograph again, her eyes urging me forward. Let's do it, Margaret, I said. I'm done being the fool. After hanging up, I organized the contract, making copies on my old scanner, another habit from my engineering. Days. Always have backups, always be prepared. The originals went back into their envelope, locked in the drawer. The copies went into a new folder labeled Nathan Legal Action. Outside, the street was quiet, the fog gone, the ocean sparkling under the midday sun. But inside, I felt a fire I hadn't known in years. Nathan and Claire had underestimated me, thought I was just an old man who'd roll over. They were about to learn I was more than that. Much more. The days after the broken window felt different, like the air in my house carried a new weight. The plywood over the front window blocked the morning light, leaving the living room dimmer, but I didn't mind. It was a reminder of what Nathan and Claire had done, a mark of their betrayal. I spent Monday morning in my study, the contract spread across my desk like a battle plan. Margaret's demand letter was set to go out Tuesday, certified mail, giving Nathan 10 days to pay $310,700, principal and interest, or face court. I kept Grace's photograph close, her steady gaze my anchor. She'd always said, "Justice is patient, Arthur, but it's never weak." I was starting to understand what she meant. That evening, my phone rang, sharp and jarring against the quiet hum of the ocean outside. Nathan's name flashed on the caller ID. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and picked up. "Dad," he said, his voice tight, almost panicked. "What's this letter? You're actually suing us? Your own son?" I leaned back in my chair, the contract open in front of me. "Nathan, you received Margaret's demand letter. You have 10 days to pay back the $260,000 you borrowed, plus interest. That's $310,700 as agreed." "Dad, this is insane." His voice cracked, and I heard Claire in the background, her tone sharp and angry, though I couldn't make out the words. "You gave us that money. There's no contract. You can't just—" "There is a contract, Nathan," I said, my voice calm but firm, like the engineer I used to be, laying out facts. "You signed it in Margaret's office, summer of 2020. Your signature's on page 8. Witnessed by Claire, notarized by Margaret's assistant. It's legally binding." Nathan's laugh was brittle, desperate. "That piece of paper? It's nothing, Dad. You're blowing this out of proportion. And what's this about damages? For that stupid window? You're acting like Claire attacked." "You!" "She threw a lamp through my window, Nathan," I said, my voice steady despite the anger simmering inside. "In front of Henry, Ellen, the Thompsons, Mrs. Carter, they all saw it. That's vandalism, maybe assault, and it happened on my property." There was a long silence, broken only by Nathan's heavy breathing and Claire's muffled shouting. "Dad," he said finally, his tone shifting to something cybernetics, ink, 150,000, 09500, 12500, 0.24%, something pleading. "We don't have that kind of money. Even if we did, we're not paying you. You're tearing our family apart over this." I looked at Grace's photograph, her eyes urging me to stay strong. "You tore this family apart when you laughed." "Off my trust and let your wife destroy my home," I said. "You signed a contract, Nathan. You made a promise. Actions have consequences." "You're being unreasonable," he snapped. "Mom would hate this, you know. She'd want us to stick together." The mention of Grace hit like a punch, but it didn't shake me the way he hoped. Instead, it lit a fire. Your mother believed in keeping your word, Nathan. She'd be ashamed of how you've treated me. And that window? That wasn't just a window. That was your mother's favorite view, the one she looked at every morning. Claire didn't just break glass. She broke respect. Silence again. Then, Claire's voice came through, loud and furious. "Give me the phone!" I heard a scuffle, then her shouting. "You're a greedy old man, Arthur. You're ruining us over money you don't even need. You'll regret this." "Mrs. Brooks," I said, my voice cold and formal, "this call is being recorded. Keep making threats if you want them used in court." I heard her gasp, then Nathan's voice returned, shakier now. "Dad, please," he said. "Let's work this out. Just us. No lawyers, no courts. Family to family." "We tried that on Monday," I said. "You called the contract worthless and threatened to fight me. Now you're getting what you asked for, a legal reckoning." "You'll see what we can do," Claire shouted in the background. "We'll find ways to make you pay for this." "I'm documenting every word," I said, my hand steady as I jotted down notes. "Every threat strengthens our case. Keep going if you'd like." The line went dead. I set the phone down, my heart pounding but my resolve unbroken. I called Margaret immediately, my notes still fresh. "They're panicking," I told her. "Nathan denies the contract, says it's nothing. Claire's making threats." Margaret's chuckle was low and confident. "Perfect. Denial in the face of a signed contract? That's a gift, Arthur. And Claire's outburst? More ammunition for damages. I'll have the letter out tomorrow morning." I hung up, feeling a strange calm settle over me. The contract lay on my desk, its pages worn but solid, a testament to Nathan's promises. I was ready for whatever came next. Thursday evening, the phone rang again. Nathan's name on the caller ID didn't surprise me. Margaret's letter had arrived that morning, and I knew he'd be rattled. "Dad," he said, his voice hollow, "this is crazy. $10,000. Where are we supposed to get that kind of money?" "That's not my concern, Nathan," I said, my tone even. "You sold a house for $600,000. You signed a contract. Honor it." "We don't have it," he shouted, desperation creeping in. "We spent it, okay? The RV, the tech, the trip, it's gone." I paused, letting his words hang in the air. "Then sell the RV, sell the gadgets, liquidate whatever you bought with my money, or the court will do it for you." "This is blackmail." Claire's voice cut in, shrill and accusing. "You're destroying us." "This is contract enforcement," I said. "There's a difference, a big one." Nathan's breathing was ragged now, and I heard Claire muttering angrily. "If you push this," he said, "you'll lose us. You'll never see us again." "I'm prepared for that," I said, and I meant it. The line went silent, then clicked off. I called Margaret again, recounting every word. "They're cracking," she said, her voice almost gleeful. "Sounds like they've consulted a lawyer who's told them the truth. That contract is ironclad. But I found something else, Arthur. Something big." "What is it?" I asked, leaning forward. "Claire used $200,000 of the house sale to invest in a venture. A shady one. Looks like a Ponzi scheme, promising huge returns on some offshore real estate deal. Nathan didn't know about it. She hid it from him, funneled the money through a shell company. It's unraveling now, and she's in deep trouble. Maybe criminal trouble." I sat back, stunned. Nathan didn't know. "Not a clue," Margaret said. "He's furious from what I hear. Their lawyers scrambling to contain it, But this makes our case even stronger. Claire's actions weaken their defense, and Nathan's ignorance doesn't erase his signature on your contract. The twist hit me like a gust of Maine wind. Claire's secret scheme had backfired, and now they were both trapped. I looked at Grace's photograph, her smile almost triumphant. "What's our next move?" I asked. "We push forward," Margaret said. "Demand letters out. If they don't pay in 10 days, we file in court. With this new information, we add fraudulent misrepresentation to the list. They're looking at asset seizure, wage garnishment, maybe worse for Claire." Tuesday morning, I met Margaret at her office. Her conference table was covered with documents, each one a weapon in our arsenal. Nathan's lawyer, a young man named Paul Carter, sat across from us, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "My clients are prepared to negotiate," he said, his voice unsteady. "A payment plan, $40,000 now, $2,000 a month." I did the math in my head. At that rate, I'd be 82 before the principal was paid. Never mind the interest. "No," I said before Margaret could speak. "Full payment. $310,700 plus $40,000 for the window, emotional distress, and public humiliation. Within 90 days, Carter shifted, his face pale. "They don't have that kind of money. The house proceeds were spent." "On an RV and a Ponzi scheme," Margaret interjected, her voice sharp. "We know about Claire's investment, Mr. Carter. It's not looking good for her." Carter's eyes widened, and he glanced at his notes, clearly caught off guard. "That's a separate matter." "Not." "Really," Margaret said, sliding a document across the table. "It shows reckless disregard for my client's loan. Sell the RV, the tech, whatever's left, or we'll take it all in court." Carter excused himself to call Nathan. Through the glass wall, I saw him pacing, his gestures frantic. "How's he taking it?" I asked Margaret. "Badly," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "His lawyer thought they could lowball us. Now they know better." Carter returned, defeated. "My clients need 48 hours to consider your terms." 48 hours, Margaret said. "Then we file. The Maine courts don't mess around with contract enforcement." After he left, I felt a weight lift. Nathan and Claire had thought they could outmaneuver me, but they'd miscalculated. The contract was my strength, and Claire's secret had just made their fall steeper. I looked at Grace's photograph in my mind, her voice clear. "Justice, Arthur. It's worth fighting for." 48 hours passed like a slow tide, each minute heavy with anticipation. I spent those days in my study, the contract still spread across my desk, its pages now familiar as old friends. The plywood over the front. Window had been replaced with new glass, thanks to Henry's nephew, and the morning light poured in again, catching Grace's photograph just the way she loved. I'd sit there, sipping coffee, watching the ocean sparkle beyond the dunes, feeling a quiet strength I hadn't known since Grace was alive. Margaret's words echoed in my mind. "Justice, Arthur. It's coming." And I believed her. The call came at 5:47 p.m. on the second day, right as I was finishing a simple dinner of clam chowder, the kind Grace used to make. Nathan's name flashed on the caller ID, and I took a deep breath before picking up. "Dad," he said, his voice flat, stripped of the arrogance I'd heard before. "We accept your terms. All of them." I leaned back in my chair, letting the words settle. "All of them?" "Yeah," he said, sounding hollow, like a man who'd lost something he couldn't name. "We'll have the money within 30 days. Three $10,700 for the loan and interest, plus $40,000 for the window and everything else. I waited, letting the silence stretch. For 39 years, I'd given in to Nathan's demands, smoothed over his mistakes, believed in his promises. Now, I let him sit with his own discomfort. How? I asked finally. We sold everything, he said, his voice breaking. The RV, the tech gadgets, Claire's jewelry. We took out a loan against my salary. We're starting over, Dad. Good, I said, my tone steady. That's what consequences look like, Nathan. You made choices, and now you're living with them. He was quiet for a long moment, then said, Claire wants to apologize for the window, for everything. I'll accept a written apology as outlined in the settlement, I said. Nothing more, nothing less. Dad, he said, his voice softer now, almost like the boy who used to sit with me on the porch, talking about his dreams. After this is over, after we pay you back, can we try to rebuild, as a family? The question caught me off guard, stirring memories of Nathan as a kid, his gap-toothed grin, the way he'd hand me tools when we fixed the old boat together, his voice calling me the best dad in the world. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who'd laughed at my trust and let his wife shatter my home. Nathan, I said, my voice calm but firm, you can rebuild a relationship the same way you'll rebuild your life, one honest step at a time, over years, with no guarantees. Trust isn't given, it's earned. That's harsh, he said, but there was no fight in his voice, only resignation. That's reality, I replied. Trust, once broken, takes time to mend. If you're serious, you'll show it with actions, not words. The line went silent, and then he hung up. I sat there, the phone still warm in my hand, feeling a peace I hadn't known since Grace passed. I called Margaret right after, my notes from the conversation neat on my desk. They've agreed, I told her. Full payment in 30 days. Congratulations, Arthur, she said, her voice warm with pride. You've taught your son a lesson he'll never forget, not just about contracts, but about respect, about what it means to be family. 2 weeks later, the bank notification arrived. $350,000 deposited into my account, principal, interest, and damages. I printed the statement and filed it next to the contract, a record of justice served, of a promise kept. It wasn't just about the money. It was about dignity, about standing up for the life Grace and I had built, about showing Nathan that actions have weight. That evening, Henry stopped by with a bottle of red wine, the kind Grace used to love. Heard through the grapevine you won, he said, his weathered face breaking into a grin. Good for you, Arthur. Took real guts to stand up to your own boy like that. We sat on my porch, the ocean breeze carrying the scent of salt and pine. The new window gleamed, catching the sunset's golden light. Henry, I said, swirling the wine in my glass, do you think I was too hard on them? He leaned back, considering the question the way he did when we talk about fishing or politics. Arthur, kindness without limits isn't kindness. It's enabling. You gave Nathan a chance to do right, and he didn't. You held him accountable. That's love, too. Tough love. But love all the same. His words settled over me. Heavy, but true. Later that night I sat in my study, Grace's photograph glowing under the desk lamp. You'd be proud, I told her, my voice soft. I finally listened to you. Her smile seemed to agree, steady and warm, like the lighthouse down the coast. The neighborhood rallied around me in the days that followed. Ellen brought over a batch of her famous blueberry muffins, saying, "We're all behind you, Arthur." The Thompsons stopped by to check on me, their faces kind but fierce. "That girl had no right," Mrs. Thompson said. "You protected your home." Even old Mrs. Carter, who rarely left her porch, sent a note. "You're stronger than you know, Arthur. Don't ever doubt it." Nathan and Claire would recover, I knew. They were young, resilient. Maybe this would teach them something. Nathan about keeping his word, Claire about the cost of her schemes. That Ponzi deal she'd sunk $200,000 into was unraveling, Margaret told me. Authorities were sniffing around, and Claire's name was on their list. Nathan, blindsided by her secret, was left to pick up the pieces. Their marriage might not survive it, but that wasn't my burden to carry. At 70, I'd learned something too. Love doesn't mean letting people walk over you. It means holding them to account, even when it hurts. Grace had always known that, and now I did too. My house was quiet again, my sanctuary restored, filled with the peace of a man who'd fought for what mattered and won. Life moves on like the tides outside my window. Maybe Nathan will call one day, not to ask for money but to share a piece of his life. Maybe Henry will stop by with more wine, or Margaret with news of another case. But for now, the silence is enough. It's mine, earned through a battle I never wanted but couldn't avoid. If there's a lesson here, it's this. Justice isn't just about righting wrongs. It's about reclaiming your own strength. At 70, I found mine. Not in anger, but in resolve. Not in vengeance, but in truth. No matter your age, no matter the cost, standing up for what's right is never too late. It's what makes you whole,